This is a very special Cocktails and Conspiracies. I'm Janelle from the Bad Taste Crimecast, and we have with us today the boys from Ciderscene, aka my brothers, Trevor and Nolan.
Well, that's us.
Which one's which?
I'm Cider. Trevor.
Okay.
Trevor's with hat.
Trevor's in the hat. Nolan's not. All
Right.
right. So you guys are from Ciderscene. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about Ciderscene? I know we've had you guys on before, but just in case someone's new.
Sure.
No job.
What?
I said you first, man. That's your job. You give nice, concise.
Sure. We're a cider blog that kind of follows the cider movement in the U.S. and Canada, mostly the U.S. For the bulk of it. We have writers kind of across the country. We'll make recipes. We'll talk about anything that's going on. We'll taste ciders and try to convert people that drink beer, wine, those types of things. At least get them into trying some cider and experiment a little bit, because there's so many ciders out there. Hop ciders that are for beer fans, ciders that taste just like wine. So just trying to educate people and bring in those individuals just to try cider at least.
Right on. And how long have you been doing it?
3+ years.
I think we're on 4 now, right?
Yeah, we're coming up on 4, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're on 3 years now.
Yeah.
For the podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, we're on year 4 then.
Yeah. If you guys have never listened to our Cocktails and Conspiracies before, it's Patreon exclusive content normally, but because it is the times of Corona, we're doing special little snips for everybody so that they're entertained, because you guys have probably burned through all of your Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys kind of consumed everything already?
Yeah, Kim and I are still trying to find things so much. So we've just been cleaning every room little by little and playing Apex Legends and working out. That's about it.
Mm-hmm. Have you watched Tiger King though?
Yes, we watched.
Okay.
We made a cider post about it.
Yes, I saw that.
And then Trevor wants to make a song about it, so we'll see how that works out.
I mean, there's already some really great Joe Exotic music out there.
Oh yeah.
He didn't sing any of that.
No, but you could probably sample from it, you know.
I was lied to in the show. I thought he was talented. He's not.
I would love to hear someone take some of the stuff out of the commercial he did for his presidential run, and auto-tune that and make it lovely, because that'd probably be great.
I was trying to find beats made from his song snippet to make a Tiger King song, so we'll see what happens. That's in the works.
We just need audio. That's all we need. Just grab some audio and I'll do it. I'll make the Carol Baskins.
I'm the Tiger King.
Yeah.
All right, so for this episode, I have all the conspiracies, and the gentlemen from Ciderscene have brought 2 cocktails.
Mm-hmm. Trevor, you want to start?
So, Trevor, go first with your cocktail.
So, in the theme of cider, I made a cocktail with Laird's Straight Applejack. So, Applejack is a brandy. We'll call it a brandy, but it's like the original name for it. But this is 86, so it's quite strong. 100% apple brandy, so it's 43% alcohol. So I mixed, they call it a jackrabbit, something jackrabbit, but I took out the maple syrup, so we're just going to call it jackrabbit. So it's Applejack, it's lemon juice and orange juice, and then you can add a little maple syrup to sweeten it. It's very good, though. Shaken.
Delicious.
Well, I don't know. I just made mine myself. I have peach tea. I have Restoration cider. They're out of Madison. This is a blackberry cider, which is really tart. The peach tea is pretty sweet, actually, so it was a good balance. And then I have Rake.
Rake.
I think that's how you pronounce it. It's from Iceland. This is really good vodka, though. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It's got a good color to it. It's both sweet.
We'll call it a rake you damn near killed you.
I was gonna call it the Icelandic road killer or whatever, the ice road killer.
Ice road
Road killer, whatever. I was close. I'm something there. There's something there.
I'll call it icy stone fruit.
Well, whoever watches this on our wonderful social media, suggest a name for it.
It's pretty good though. It's Restoration Cider makes good cider. They put some of their proceeds to restoring streams and waterways in the Wisconsin and Midwest region. So that's kind of where their logo comes from. It's an apple tree, but it's also a waterway. So good stuff from the veterans.
It looks like a rune a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, they got
I'm going PG-13 with a California Raspberry Coke.
Is it good?
It tastes like a slushie. I actually really like it. I normally don't like flavored Coke, except for the OG vanilla Coke.
Yeah, good.
But this is actually really good. It's like a Mexican Coke with flavor in it.
Where do you get it?
I got this from Walmart. I've been ordering all of my groceries from Walmart presently. I normally don't shop at any major grocery store. I usually go to all the small guys. But because it's crazy out there, I've been ordering and picking up, which has been very weird. They just they stand about 7 feet away from my car and they're like, "Are you Janelle?" Like, "We're going to sign for you." I'm like, cool.
Well, yeah.
Christine
wanted a puzzle. It's a Statue of Liberty, like Lego's Architect, but it was at Barnes and Noble, so we ordered it in the parking lot and then waited for them to scan it in, and then they brought it to our car. It's very strange.
It's very weird. It's like the world is turning into the movie WALL-E.
Oh yeah.
It's very strange.
We're all gonna be fat and sassy.
Exactly. We're all just gonna have mobile armchairs pretty soon.
Oh.
But I tried to order this about 5 times, and for some reason they were out of it. It only comes in a 4-pack, like glass bottles. All they had was the Georgia peach one, and they kept like they'll substitute for you if you say you want a substitution. And I always say yes, because sometimes it's like, oh, they don't have this cheese, they have this cheese, and I'm like, whatever, it's fine. But they kept trying to give me the Georgia peach one, and I don't like it. It's gross.
Not the peach.
This one's the only one that's good.
Yeah.
Coke commercial.
I know.
Good-blooded American drink right there. That is Applejack.
Actually, those would probably taste good together.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't really have any alcohol in my house right now. I have like a tiny airplane bottle of gin, but nothing really good to mix it with. So Coke it is. So I thought it'd be interesting to have some conspiracies that were Apple related, but I don't mean the fruit. I mean the company.
Oh, okay.
So we're staying on theme here. Have you guys heard the conspiracy that iPhones listen to your conversations?
Yeah, Facebook, iPhones, all that stuff.
I have nothing but Apple products, so I'm sure they have a wonderful folder on me. But I mean, how much of that do you think is true? Not just with Apple, but like, I know one of you had an Alexa or has an Alexa.
Yeah, I do. I have Alexa. Whoever has Google.
I have an Alexa.
Yeah, you have both. I have 3 in my house. I think that's probably the more telling story there. It's more interesting. I work in marketing, so I know how it generally works. Facebook, usually, if a friend of mine or someone in a close proximity, generally that's a friend of mine, likes something, watches something, it ends up on your feed more likely. So people tend to think that those apps are listening to them or their phones are listening to them. But I've tested it before. I've actually listened to a podcast that talks about that exclusively. And it with Alexa or your iPhone, things that you've had conversations about seem to pop up, and I've never searched for it. Christine's never searched for it, and I don't think my friends are searching for it because it's so random. But I've seen them pop up, and ads or Amazon suggesting those. So there's just something there that I know how the behavior works on Facebook. I know how the suggesting, and I know how we track people online through digital marketing. So there's something there that is picking up on some kind of voice search, I think. No, that is kind of in a conspiracy space. I still think it's true.
Yeah, for these giant companies like Google, Apple, all those. I mean, they're data companies by the end of the day. So data is really rich for them, and that's where they make a lot of their money. So I could see Apple, especially, or a Google, let's say Apple in this case, definitely using that, some sort of snippets of your voice that gets a keyword, try to advertise sell to you. So I can definitely see that realistic.
Yeah, and working in behavioral health, we actually used a phone tracking service. So when you made a phone call, we'd actually be able to, within the call, we'd pick out keywords. So if someone says a keyword like Medicare insurance or Cigna, Aetna, once they say that term, Aetna was hard to pick up on just because it's mostly like little sounds. It's a hard word for it to recognize, but it recognized Medicare. So when someone says that, it triggered a signal that said it was Medicare. So you could use that. You could reverse engineer that. I knew the person who called. You can track it back to an IP address, and you could pretty much remarket to them. Depends on how you use the information. There's certainly laws around that, but it's all possible. So they can use the exact same technology on scale.
Yeah, behind closed doors, someone like Apple who's sophisticated making technology like that, they certainly can use that. So it's got to happen at some degree.
Well, there was a case that we discussed in a news segment in one of our shows not too recently, where an Alexa, it doesn't record what you're saying, but it has like a delayed memory is what they called it in the court document. So it has like a short-term memory where it kind of records something for so many seconds. And so they were trying to use it because it recorded somebody telling Alexa to dial 911.
Yeah.
So they tried to use that in a court case. So it does have like kind of a small delayed memory, not necessarily recording you 100%.
Yeah,
but
not storing or whatever.
The thing with Apple products and iPhones is they're using more of a geolocation marketing kind of a thing, which if you're not familiar with that, your phone is basically tracking wherever you're moving constantly. And whether it's the phone itself or the apps that you use, they all kind of come together and track your location. And certain places will set up kind of like these drop pins, so to speak. When you cross over a threshold somewhere, it's geo-tracking you, and then it sends that information to your phone and targets you with different advertisements within the area or for the place that you just walked into. So when people say that they're listening to your conversations, it's more or less geolocation as opposed to it actually recording your conversation.
Yeah, I've used that for advertising before. We call it geofencing.
Yep.
So let's say I worked for a hockey team before. When somebody gets into a mall or in an area, into a shop where people tend to spend more money, that we can kind of say that they have disposable income. So we'd market them with like, hey, we have a hockey game tonight, those types of things. So it can definitely be done. They're using it to track COVID. They knew Tennessee was one of the worst states for people that are still traveling because they use those the geolocation to see that people are constantly moving. And the state of Tennessee, people are still moving at a pretty regular rate. So they decided to shut that city or that town or state down for the most part. Nashville heavily, but the whole state, I think, generally.
Yeah. So I have another interesting little conspiracy. Supposedly, Apple Corporation was price fixing audiobooks and ebooks. So there was a whole conspiracy that they were trying to control the electronic book market. Did you hear about that at all?
I've never heard
that. I've heard of Amazon. They said that Amazon tried to do that as well. But I mean, again, you got two of the biggest companies now talk Amazon and I mean, price fixing maybe not, but they can definitely control the market a little bit. So in traditional supply and demand, they have so much more coverage, more money to throw at things. They can kind of still control it in a lawful way, but I still would say it's kind of price fixing a bit. I don't know.
I mean, really, the expense of the entire experience is just like storing data when it comes to that. So, like, if anyone's storing data, like the cost is so low, but if they own most of the market share, I mean, I guess you can do whatever you want, really. So
Yeah.
it's for them, but they can own the market and control how it goes. But
So there was a court case filed against Apple for this. So it wound up being a true conspiracy. So in 2013, an antitrust case, it was the United States versus Apple Corporation. They conspired to raise the price of ebooks, which was in violation of the Sherman Act. So a lawsuit was filed, and it was in conjunction with 5 publishing companies and Apple to all kind of fix the prices on these ebooks. So I think eventually it was thrown out, but it was brought to court. And so it kind of set the precedent for that sort of book pricing with ebooks. And it named a couple really major publishers, like there's Penguin, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Macmillan, like all the big guys who already control the market anyway. Which I think is pretty interesting because you have a lot of people who can self-publish now. And I don't think that that's like really taking too much away from these major publishers, but it is a worry if someone's in talks with a publishing company and they don't like the way it's setting up and they self-publish instead. But I know, Nolan, you did self-publish.
And it's interesting too, if you self-publish on, I think I did it through Amazon, their Kindle, whatever that portal is, their Kindle publisher. Once you publish it on there, you're not supposed to publish it elsewhere too. So one, you've done all the work, you've put it together, you've composed it, then they own the rights to it in a certain sense. So you can't put it elsewhere. But you, as a writer, then you've owned the rights, you own the control of how the pages lay out and how much you price it. But at the end of the day, they kind of own the rights to it. And I mean, the controlling of price for books, electronic books, doesn't really make sense because people know what the market value of a book generally is. So
2013, though.
What?
She said 2013 that case went. So this is a while back where ebooks was still kind of not new, but new at this point. So.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate then. But nowadays, I think we're probably a little bit too savvy for that and kind of understand the price point for books. And
I mean, most ebooks and Kindle things are like $1, $2. You know, it's inconsequential of how little it costs. But because I'm in grad school, when you look at grad school level books on an electronic format, they're still extremely pricey. They're not $100, but they're like $25 to $50. And you're thinking about something that's in digital form, like why do you think that it's that much? I mean, I can understand that in an academic sense, those people are doing a lot of research. But again, you have to think of the format. It is just a digital format. So I think that's the price fixing becomes an issue, is like more academic. Again, with the colleges, that's a whole nother conspiracy, the price of books and things at college. I was a little surprised with the corona. I go to Northern Illinois University, which you guys have went to, or our sister went to. We're like a Husky alumni family. But but when corona hit, my school was the first to shut down completely, go to e-learning right away. And they're one of the first schools to actually give refunds to students for parking passes, housing, food, and our classes because of the coronavirus and because we're not on campus, which I thought was crazy. So I know there's a lot of other schools where teachers and stuff are complaining and students are complaining that they paid all this money for their housing and everything. And there's schools that are getting kicked out of their housing. NIU let their students stay there. They let them still use the dining hall. So I thought that was pretty interesting, talking about college conspiracy, but you know, there's a couple people who are on their shit and know what they're doing. So the last Apple conspiracy I have before we play our very strange game is the conspiracy that Apple is purposefully making their older software slow down as they launch new products. I'm sure you guys have heard this.
I've heard that.
I mean, that goes to any phone company. It's that 2-year marker when your contract's up that your phone tends to slow down a bunch. Chubb, if you want to go first on your thoughts on that.
Well, I definitely think there's some truth to it, because when you engineer and design a product, you want people to replace it. So I do know that the phone, certain areas of it are designed to last a long time, but when you're talking software, things move so rapidly right now, especially. There comes a new chip every couple months nowadays. It's not necessarily only just the fact that I do think that they designed it a little bit. The way you use your phone, they make it so that it's got that capacity for about 2 years, unless you went back and reset everything. And so it's a little bit of that for life cycle, but also it's just the way consumers use things. It's too slow because there's a new chip. So they compare their 2-year-old phone to something 2 years, and our trajectory of chips it's like this. I forget what principle, but it's like we're here, they can still go here. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think one thing that tends to happen too is as you get security updates and updates to your phone that run let's say I use Android phones, I always have. I'm running 10.1 now. By the end of the life cycle of my phone, I'm running 10.5, which is beyond the capability of my phone, or at least stretching its abilities a little bit. So I think it's a bit of that. We abuse our phones because we never turn them off. They are actually designed to withstand just being on all together. So I think that certainly the phone kind of performance dips, not only the battery, you'll notice that in 2 years, your battery is just going to be crappy. That's because you never turn it off. But beyond that, performance of the phone, the way you use it's just like a computer. I use my computers at work heavily in 6 months, and my computer slows down a ton. So it's all about usage as well. People don't tend to delete apps, or they download more powerful apps with more updates that make them stronger or more powerful apps. So I don't know. I think that's kind of the most of the issue. I think sometimes when they do security updates or updates to it, they know it's going to kind of break the older versions of the phone. So I think that tends to be the kind of control. I don't know if there's any truth to any of that, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, but engineers design the phones for 2 years to limit the usage you do it. So they know that it's going to get abused like that. They got to just act against that. So I do think that they do some updates and things to slow it down to get you to at least filter, just like what happened with Verizon and all those other phone companies starting to throttle data, like not all of them. It's a similar type of principle.
Yeah. They're preparing for the 5Gs.
It causes cancer, apparently.
We need one more G. But in an article in 2017, Apple admitted that it was deliberately slowing down older iPhones to protect against aging batteries.
There it is.
It addressed issues with software updates, battery replacement programming, and it stated that it never and would never do anything to intentionally shorten the life of an Apple product. But
you just don't want those batteries to die on people, and they'll get even more angry. So I get it. If the thing's trying to be at peak performance for 2 years, it's like leaving a computer on nonstop running at least 40% of its memory at all times. That's just going to burn out a battery. It's going to burn out a phone. So, I mean, we abuse cell phones. We should honestly be turning them off every night and using like an alarm clock to wake up. Your phone would last you double the length, if not longer.
I mean, I think they'd probably last 5 years. But again, we abuse them. It's just the way we. And these apps we have are so strong. They're pulling 90% of your phone usage.
Kind of in our earlier conversation, the way that the apps work, from like geolocations to the time of day to always running in the background so you can use it immediately. I mean, that at least 20 of your apps you don't even know are running in the background at all times. Mm-hmm. That kills your phone. So.
Yeah, I remember when I first learned that you could kill apps. Like, this is a long time ago. I think I had like a chocolate. Yeah. And I was like, oh, God.
Whoa. I've seen older people at the airport before who someone was sitting next to them and they're like, my phone sucks. I just got it a week ago. And someone's like, yeah, you got to like close the app. So like, what? They opened it up and there was like 3,000 windows.
That was me the first time I got a smartphone. Because for the longest time, I had a Nextel with the brick, and then I had a bunch of chocolates too. So those weren't like super duper smart, but they were still like, there was a lot required.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to think of the first. Yeah, you used to use an app killer.
That'll be
Oh yeah. You used an app killer to kill apps back in the day, but the funny thing is when you use an app killer, a lot of the apps will just come right back online essentially, because as soon as you kill it, it's like, no, this isn't always on feature. So what you're doing is you're burning your battery because it has to stop it and then start it back up. There's some apps that are always running.
Yeah. Ugh, so those are all the Apple conspiracies that I
There's
had.
going to be a conspiracy that he's still alive.
What?
I thought there was going to be a Jobs conspiracy that he's still alive somewhere.
I mean, there are those conspiracies that, you know, Steve Jobs is still alive, that actually a doppelganger was killed, and you know, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
You say Lennon, Tupac.
What?
McCartney.
Lennon, Tupac.
Yeah.
They bought the
I wanted
Beatles
to stick with
because McCartney's still alive.
I wanted to stick with the tech stuff because I knew you guys would have a considerable amount of information about that. Because although I enjoy conspiracy theories, I enjoy debunking them more.
Oh, yeah.
That I think is the fun part.
Oh, yeah.
There's always things I also too I find it very interesting when conspiracies wind up being true. So like experiments with because this is on my brain. I found a tick in my house today. You know, there's like all those conspiracies where ticks were given, you know, stuff on purpose and sent out in the world. Well, we found out that they were actually using ticks in some experimentation. So sometimes there's a great amount of truth in the conspiracy. Everything's kind of steeped in a little bit of truth, but sometimes it ends up being completely fucking true.
We'll hear the conspiracies about COVID once this all ends. I've already heard a bunch of them. That'll be a whole episode for you.
Yeah,
well, no,
one
of them is like has to do with 5G, like that you brought it up earlier.
Yep.
It's tied into this whole thing.
Yeah, 5G, COVID-19. There's a lot of people trying to weave tales that colloidal silver and all those supplements that are sold, you know, to preppers are going to prevent you from getting COVID-19. Again, it's a fucking virus. Colloidal silver isn't going to do jack shit for you.
Well, I'm going to just put, you know, just aluminum foil around my house so I'll be safe from everything.
Exactly, right?
I liked it.
The gamma rays, the microwave rays. I don't have a microwave in my house on purpose.
I know a lot of people
We need a microwave.
But I thought we would end with a fun game that I played on our stream the other day, but it's something that I've been seeing a lot of. Have you guys seen the quarantine house game going around Instagram and Twitter?
I don't know if I have.
You haven't?
No,
It's kind of like MASH, where you pick your house, your quarantine house.
I don't even think I've seen that. No, I don't think I've seen
Okay, it's kind of newish. So it's like picking, you know, like your house on, oh my gosh, I just forgot the TV show.
Fantasy Island.
No, on HBO. House Stark.
Fantasy Island.
Game of Thrones. It's like picking your Game of Thrones house.
Got it, yeah.
So I have 4 houses, and in each house is a variety of serial killers, an author, and a character from Tiger King.
Okay, I did see that. I saw it with NBA players and stuff. Okay,
Okay. So I'm going to read off the houses, and then we'll discuss which one you'd pick and which one you wouldn't want to be part of.
Right.
So the first house, and there's also some politicians thrown in here too. So it's like a nice smattering. The first house is John Wayne Gacy dressed up as Pogo the Clown.
Oh.
Very important. Joe Biden. Ted Bundy. From Tiger King, we have Jeff Lowe, the guy who bought out Joe Exotic.
I mean, Joe.
And then the true crime author Eric Larson, who wrote Devil in the White City.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's house one.
Tough read, but good.
That's a hard no. I can already tell you on all that. I'm not level with Biden either. Thanks.
So house two, this one's going to be real rough. House two is Jack the Ripper.
All right.
Donald Trump.
Oh,
Okay.
Ed Kemper, who had a shoe fetish.
Yep.
Yeah.
Carol Baskins from Tiger King.
Carol Baskins.
Carol Baskins.
There's a lot of people on Reddit with foot fetishes. So.
Exactly. And Truman Capote, who wrote In Cold Blood.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's house number two. It's a nice, weird mixture.
I like that one.
I'm liking that. Yeah.
Okay, house three. This starts going to get real weird. The dog that David Berkowitz thought was God. He's the son of Sam. Elizabeth Warren. H.H. Holmes.
All right.
Joe Exotic.
Oh, that's a wild one.
And Anne Rule. Very famous true crime author.
Okay.
That's house number three.
That sounds pretty fun, actually.
Yeah. It was a weird mix. And house four, the last house. The Zodiac Killer.
Okay.
If you know who that is.
Bernie Sanders.
Oh. It's like go hang out with Larry David, Trev.
Charles Manson.
That's a rough choice.
Doc Antle.
Who's that?
From Tiger King.
Tiger King.
He's the guy who had the harem of women.
Yes, he's like, oh, these are all my. I'm not going to say if I live with them during the week or not.
They're not my wives.
Yeah.
And then Agatha Christie, the author of Murder on the Orient Express. So those are all four houses. Which one would you choose? Which one would you stay away from? Which one would you like to listen in on?
Okay. Well, I can go first. I definitely will stay in house number two.
Mm-hmm.
And
Everyone's gonna have the same answer.
for two reasons. Donald Trump is entertaining, even if he's an idiot on things. And I'm gonna talk to Carol Baskin. We'll get her, grow her confidence, and she's gonna tell me she killed her husband, and she's gonna tell me all about the sardine oil. That's why I'm sticking to it. And I'm hard passing on number one.
No, Trevor and I watched Room Number 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We both watched because it's got that's the king in it. It's got the Tiger King in it.
Yeah, it's got Joe Exotic in there.
And H.H. Holmes, and who else was in there?
Elizabeth Warren, Anne Rule, and the dog that the son of Sam thought was God.
That is awesome.
That's a TV show.
Exactly. I think I would pick that one because the dog.
Joe Exotic would tame that dog, turn it into some sort of tiger god thing, and he'd make it. I would love it. That's good TV.
Yeah. A lot of people that I've played this game with, because I wrote this list.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people picked House 4 because of the dynamic between Bernie Sanders, Doc Antle, and Charles Manson.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
I mean, Bernie Sanders is old, so I mean, I don't know. I think
I feel like him and Doc Antle would be an interesting kind of, because Doc Antle to me is very much like, what's that fucking singer's name who came to McHenry County Fair and they tried to get him to, Ted Nugent.
Oh.
Doc Antle's like Ted Nugent,
Yeah.
And so the dynamic between him and Bernie Sanders would be interesting. But they also, a lot of people also brought up, there's a conspiracy that Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so,
I've never heard that.
And so that's interesting to add to that House 4, the Zodiac Killer if he was Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
That would be,
You're talking about how big and pointy his nose was, and that was evidence. I'm like, how is that evidence? Pointy nose.
He wore a hood.
I know.
It was only
the projection
seen once.
The projection.
I mean, the timelines don't match up. It's not at all plausible. but
When
it's a
Ted-
hilarious conspiracy. But I feel like nobody would want to touch the first house with a 10-foot pole because of Joe Biden and Ted Bundy. You
Yeah.
have like these very weird, touchy-feely, googly-eyed creepers in that house. And then you add the clown level on it
Yo,
because it's John
I
Wayne
know.
Gacy dressed up as the clown, acting as the clown.
That's where I already said no. And then I saw Joe Biden, and I'm like, already another no.
are Trevor and I too old for the clown man? Are we too
No.
old? We're right now.
You're in his sweet spot. He
Uh,
likes 18 to 35, man. That's
yeah, because I was like, I knew it was definitely like there was some there's some like early mid-20s in there, but yeah, I guess no, we're still in that range, so we can't be in that.
Him dressed as a clown, no, just anyways. If it was just him and Joe Biden, I'd say no.
yeah. I don't like clowns, so him dressed as a clown is even worse. And he had like
Joe
really
Biden
terrible
gets
clown
in
makeup.
the house every day. He just keep coming in and be like, "Who are you guys?"
The
You
revolving.
know, like, and two, when I think of it, I think of like Joe Biden, hair smelling Joe Biden. That's
Oh.
where it goes for me.
He's just as creepy as a serial killer.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
Ted
So
Bundy, this guy's a creep.
it is, yeah.
Yeah, they're all looking at him like, look at this weird hair in public. I take it home and
I feel like Eric Larson would be able to get a really good book out of it, though. You know, like he'd be able to write it in such a dynamic way that it would be pretty interesting. Read.
Capote in the second house.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. He's a
That's
weird.
He's a little bit creepy, though. Truman Capote's a little creepy. And I think he did a lot of drugs and alcohol, so he might not be sober the whole time.
But he'd be
Ed Kemper was
interesting to have a conversation with him as well. So I mean, it's a good house. It's a good house.
Ed Kemper was very quiet and creepy. He had a foot fetish and would like dismember women.
he was pretty intellectual, though, wasn't he?
He was pretty what?
Intellectual, wasn't he? Or at
Yes.
least, yeah, that's what they portray him in things. So.
Yeah, he is smart. He's just like kind of got like a little bit. I think he's like on the spectrum a little bit. Is the way they kind of posit it. But yeah, I think having Carol Baskins in there would definitely probably set off Jack the Ripper. So,
Yeah.
That's he's definitely Carol.
Capote would be able to tell if Carol Baskins killed her husband. So I think he'd give us that expert insider look, you know, from the in cold blood, all that, everything that relates to that. So wasn't he kind of like in love with the dude in cold blood?
He played like he was to get more information, but I don't think he was. The guy who was the murderer definitely was interested. But yeah, it's a fun game. I highly suggest going on Instagram, and because there's a lot of companies that are doing it for like their products. Like, oh, which house is? I'm pretty sure I've seen a couple cider companies do it. There's a place in Chicago that I order marshmallows from that did it. But I think I'm going to post this one up and so that other people can share it and play the game too. It's very, very weird, but also very interesting. And then I noticed.
Trevor and I were easy house tours, I think. So.
Yeah.
I knew what you were going to pick before. Janelle could just read it. I could tell you exactly what Nolan was going to pick.
Yeah, it's funny. It's very funny. I can kind of feel out who would pick what. Like, I knew when I played this with Vicky, she would pick House 4 before as soon as I said Bernie Sanders, she was like, done, House 4. I couldn't care who else is in it. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's also very interesting to kind of go through. I didn't want it just to be serial killers because that would be boring, you know, like to throw in some pop culture reference and a couple of politicians because it's an election year. Definitely spices it up a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So that's what we have today for Cocktails and Conspiracies. Thank you guys for joining us. Do you guys want to shout out anything that you're doing while we're in quarantine coming up?
Well, I guess coming up after this thing ends, we're going to start trying to do cider tour videos of as many cideries across the U.S. as we can. So that'd be something new and interesting that's never been done. So that's kind of on the horizon. But other than that, we're just making quarantine content, I call it, just like this.
And always, you know, writing articles or anything, again, that kind of bring people that are outside of the world of cider kind of into it. I mean, that's our job. I think of all the kind of cider blogs and writers, I think we do that better than anyone. I think that's what makes us kind of interesting. We're on the fringe of the space in the most part.
Mm-hmm. And you're Ciderscene on everything, right?
Yep, just Ciderscene. Ciderscene. I think I spelled
Yeah,
that right.
so you can check out their website. Their Instagram has a lot of stuff. They have merch you can buy too. All the
YouTube
things.
page. YouTube. With
Yep. We're going to be doing more videos like this as well. We have been doing one a week, and then we'll be putting out some pre-recorded content at will, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, have a cocktail, stay inside, wash your hands,
Stay away from Joe Biden.
Stay away from Joe Biden. Please vote responsibly. I don't know. But thank you guys for joining us.
Goodbye.
Enjoy your cocktail. Bye.